I did a video where I ate 5 days of eating the World War II ration diet, and I decided to do a follow-on video to the 1950s. The 1950s, obviously a bit of time had passed. War had been over for a few years now, yet rationing was still a thing. Sugar rationing ended at midnight on September 26, 1953, after 13.5 years. This had been attempted back in 1949, but the demand outweighed the supply, so they had to wait a few more years before the ration was lifted again. The last item to be taken off ration was meat in July 1954. In the 1950s, it was very different from what we know today. Meat and 2 veg made up most meals, but the actual running of the daily food was very different from ours. The main meal, which was dinner, was had at lunchtime, and a smaller supper was eaten in the evening. Snacking was almost non-existent, and not even needed with the large dinner times that was had. Sweet tooths were satisfied with their puddings and desserts. Obviously in this video I can't cover everything of the 1950s because there was so much change in those years. I would love to do like an hour-long video, but that's just not plausible. I did a lot of my research online and I asked my grandparents about what their experience was like. Take this with a pinch of salt because I've been taking a lot of different information from different places, so some of the crossover might not be exact. I try my best to get as much research as possible so this video is as accurate as possible. So let's get on with day one. Good morning everyone. So today I am starting my 5 days of eating a 1950s diet. Every visit our nanny and granddad Marshall, they always go all out for breakfast in terms of they lay the table, they even put the tablecloth on. So I have taken that approach because in the 1950s they were similar, like each meal was a proper sit down meal. It wasn't like now where you just eat things on the go. So I've got toast rack ready, I've got some hot water, I've got marmalade. Obviously homemade would be ideal, but we don't have that. That's the toast. I'm gonna pour myself some hot water. The ration for tea until 1952, so I'm gonna just have hot water because I want to save my tea for another time. I don't want to waste it in the morning and not have it for the rest of the day. My granddad said when they did toast and marmalade it was like barely any butter because I believe there was still a ration on butter, so lots of people did just use margarine, which people weren't very into. I'm gonna literally barely use any margarine. This isn't much different from my everyday breakfast because I normally have toast or cereal, but I know a lot of people who don't have breakfast in this day and age. Most of my friends at uni don't have breakfast. So I'm making my rice pudding, which I'm not buzzing for, but I have to do rice pudding because that is literally all I've read everywhere is like rice pudding for pudding, rice pudding, rice pudding, rice pudding. To prepare the bubble and squeak, we've got our leftover roast potatoes from yesterday, which I'm gonna mash. I don't know if it'll work because obviously they're roast potatoes. Then I've got the vegetables. I've got leeks, spring greens, and Brussels sprouts. I'm gonna be rooting and tooting, and we're gonna make ourselves a 1950s dinner. There we have it, bubble and squeak and an egg. I really enjoyed my bubble and squeak. It's gone, but I really want a proper pudding, and I feel like for me rice pudding is just like porridge, and I hate porridge. So I'm gonna tidy up first and then we're gonna do pudding. She is delicious. They wouldn't have been able to not eat it because there was no waste.
But that was just dinner back then, so you didn't really think about it, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was just like, that was
standard. That's a long mouthful.
It's just not going down. There was no time to be fussy back in the day, was there? Because you wouldn't.
I think food was different back then. It was more just.
You would have to eat it, or you wouldn't. I'm a bit hungry, but obviously they don't snack. But you can eat seasonal fruit. I'm gonna have a plum and an apple. Tea time, and tea time is a smaller meal. And I've gone for Welsh rarebit, which I've never actually had before. Obviously dairy-free cheese. I'm quite intrigued. It's got beer, Worcestershire that word, and mustard in it. So here goes. This was on quite a lot of the websites. It said Welsh rarebit, so my Welsh rarebit, which would have been a lot better if it wasn't the disgusting Violife cheese, which is not pleasant. But as a whole, it was okay. And now for pudding, dessert. I don't know. Because pudding was at lunchtime. You have your pudding with lunch. You have your cake with tea. Okay. I made some parkin. Here she is. And I've never had parkin before. It was apparently very much had. Here we go, Mr. Parkin. Let's try you. It's basically just a funny textured ginger
Yeah, you
cake.
drink it out of there, you fun.
Some parking, and normally after dinner I have pudding and then another snack, and then later on in the evening I have more snacks. I'm a bit peckish now, but Mum said they probably wouldn't have been allowed an extra slice. Good morning, it is day 2 and I've had to get up a tiny bit earlier, only 5-10 minutes earlier, because I've made myself dippy eggs and soldiers for breakfast. Oh, a dippy egg. And they would have obviously taken the time in the morning because it was definitely 3 square meals, because I realised yesterday I was a bit hungry because I don't think I ate enough in my meals. I think I should have had more toast or something at night. What a great breakfast. I feel fueled and ready for the day. So I just thought I'd interrupt. Obviously normally they have their big meal at lunchtime and then their small meal at dinner, but because I was at uni I couldn't do that, so I just swapped it around and had my jam toast at lunchtime with the cake and then the main meal now. Amen. Dinner is served. Here we go, sausage casserole, 2 veg and a potato. Bosh, made a jam roly-poly and I've never made one before.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Enough.
No, not.
That's why it's got jam with it, and that's why you have custard with it.
Use more sweet stuff.
Put some custard with it, Jess.
The weird thing is, right, I have loads of energy, but I am hungry. So it's like, I think the food is sustaining me, but I think in my head, because I should be snacking, or not should, I do snack all the time, I am hungry, do you know what I mean? But it's given me enough energy and I'm not like feeling tired or worn out, like it's given me enough fuel to keep sustained. To think that in 1948, only 2% of homes in the UK had even a fridge. Freezers weren't even a blip on the mind. In 1959, only 13% of homes had one. Not much growth there. Betty Crocker was bought out again after its failure in the 1930s due to housewives not wanting to be replaced. 1954 saw Wimpy open up and start selling burgers and milkshakes as the rations had been lifted. In 1954, the Just Roll company began. Inspiration came from the ladies in the bakery who said when asked what they did with the pastry cuttings, "We just roll it out." 1958, Butlins introduced the UK to chop suey. At this point, not even spaghetti bolognese was around. Instant noodles then became a thing along with Uncle Ben's instant rice. This is where the UK's intrigue for other countries' cuisines soared. 1959 saw Bird's Eye's famous Arctic roll, which became a pudding staple. When I was doing my research into the 1950s diet, I found a few lovely little excerpts of what people's experience was like of food in 1950s. So I'm gonna put that up on the screen now because I think it's really nice to see what people experienced and how life was different back then. So I thought I'd do a little midway reflect on how I'm finding it. And the first thing I've noticed is that it's very repetitive. It's like bread, bread, bread. And I actually don't mind that because I really like bread, but I know some people absolutely can't stand it. And I can imagine it getting quite boring because there's not much variation in what you can have with it. Also, I was speaking to my mum and she was saying how it was very, very repetitive. Like it would be meat, 2 veg, and some sort of carb every day, but it wasn't like flavorful at all because herbs hadn't been introduced really. It was literally just salt and pepper for everything, so it was really, really bland. So I found this weekly plan of what someone's recommended week could look like in a recipe book, and I found it quite interesting because that's my toast. It was actually quite varied, but then I'm thinking, is that more for someone who has a lot more money, like a middle class person who would be able to buy those extravagant things like fish cakes for breakfast, whereas the working class families would probably have just had to literally have toast. So I want to like make sure I'm doing a balanced video where I show both sides, so I'm having to try and factor that in. But this morning, guess what we're having? Marmalade on toast again. So I just made lunch and I've got the same, so this is for tomorrow. I've made it in a lunch box so I can have it at uni. There's some more potatoes hiding under there. We've got boiled potatoes, which I hate. I'm really not a fan of boiled potatoes unless there's something saucy. I like a fried potato. We've got our 2 veg, spring greens and leeks, Swede mash because that's what loads of the recipe said, and a lamb chop. So I'm gonna have that, and I've got it with a bit of gravy, and I'm gonna put some mint sauce on. I'm very hungry as per usual, so I feel like I'm ready for this. I actually quite like having my main meal at lunchtime. Shaking it up a bit, you know. Bosh. Time for some dessert. It is yesterday's leftover jam and roly-poly. Obviously, would love a different pudding, but you have to eat up what you started.
Also, something to remember is that there were loads of different puddings that they could have had, and there were very traditional puddings such as like apple pie, and there were loads of ones that were a bit more unusual, and things like pineapple upside down cake, ones like that. But obviously it was only a week and I didn't want to waste the pudding, so I only made the ones that you can see in this video. But if you want another video where I try some things out, let me know.
I started to eat the first layer off the top, and then I realised I need to film. Got jam roly-poly and a giant thing of tea. It's dinner time! I'm just having toast. So, I've had my toast and I'm gonna have another slice. Yeah, I'm gonna have toast and cake. And I was reading up supper, and people had Jacob's cream crackers were about all people had for supper, and sometimes milk.
Even if I did go.
It's parking time. So I'm gonna ask, is supper, as they call it?
Sorry, hold on one moment.
7 o'clock.
It's not 8 o'clock, Grace.
Yeah, 7 though, isn't
You
it?
told me 7, I could have held out.
I told you 7 or 8. Basically, Chloe really wanted some after tea, and I wouldn't let her because I always share my food. I don't feel it's often reciprocated. People beg me in this house for my food.
I'm not dairy intolerant, so you can't eat my food. Sorry that I don't share it. I don't want to make you ill.
Back time at 7 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. It is another day, and it is another tea and toast day. Woo! And if I'm honest, I just want some like crunchy nut cornflakes, pain au chocolat, things like that. Normally I'd be fine with toast every morning, like I wouldn't even notice, but because in my head everything else is off limits, I want it more. Oh, my granddad said he used to have beef dripping, and it would be left over from the Sunday roast. It'd be like proper beef dripping, and that's like most of the food. It was all made from things like actual real life. Do you know what I mean? Everyone, so it is end of day 4, and I had my meal as you saw, which is the exact same as yesterday's, for lunch. So I messaged my granddad because I was a bit confused about the whole bread situation. I was like, is it just 2 slices? Because yesterday I had 3 and I felt much better. And he said you basically had as much bread as you wanted, but obviously jam and marmalade were still on rations because of the sugar thing, so you did have to be a bit sparse on that, and butter as well you have to be really careful with. And explained that there were salt your own crisps, and then later on in the 50s came out with completely flavour your own crisps, like meat seasonings and things like that. So I feel like it is the biggest treat right now that I'm having a packet of crisps, and I never thought in my life that it would be such a treat to have a pack of crisps. I have them every day basically, and yesterday as well with the Jacob's cream crackers. Never thought I'd be saying I was excited to have Jacob's cream crackers at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. Quite novel, and I'm actually weirdly okay with the whole toast thing. Okay, hi. So I'm about to have this, and I can't believe it. I am so excited. I never go that long without crisps, and I feel like this is a big treat, and I can totally understand how they would appreciate food way more back then. I feel like we take food so much for granted, and even the way my granddad was speaking about it, and the sweet, sweet taste of fried potato. You think now how many crisps there are in the world, and back then this was literally, in Britain anyway, the only option they had. It was the only option, but they didn't think of any other options because there was no other options. You know what I mean?
By that I meant what you don't know doesn't hurt you. So have those crisps because they weren't invented, so they didn't want them. Whereas now we have so many things that we're like, oh my gosh, I need this, I need this, I need this. Where in hindsight, do I really need to eat crisps every day? Yes.
I have never appreciated a bag of crisps more in my life. I can't believe just how different that was, like how many years ago, and it's so different from how we eat now. And I know basically everywhere where I've read, the biggest treat of the week was Friday fish and chips night, and I have been looking forward to this since Monday, and I'm so excited. Hello everyone! I didn't get to show you my breakfast because I was babysitting and I just forgot to film it, but I just had jam on toast yet again. Here we have dinner. It is fish and chips because it's Fish and Chip Friday, and literally everywhere I read, they were saying how fish and chips were like the biggest treat on a Friday. And obviously you're gonna have jam roly-poly for pudding, I'm really getting used to this big meal at lunchtime. It seems right, because then you've got the rest of the day and then you just have a light dinner at tea time. It just makes sense. So I'm all finished with dinner. Now I'm gonna have some jam roly-poly. And then I'll only have one meal left. I wouldn't have wasted it in 1950, so I'm not wasting it today. Hi guys, I'm about to consume my last meal. I'm not in the mood for jam anymore, or marmalade. 3 quick things I need to add. First one, my granddad said chicken was only like on a treat. Literally chicken was a treat, mate. You'd get it on like Christmas and other times. Second thing, in this video as well, there are a few things I wanted to consume that I didn't get a chance to. This one I wanted to try were these meatballs that I'll put on the screen right now, that are made from like oxtails and whatnot, I don't really know. The second thing I wanted to try was licorice root, couldn't find it anywhere. Third thing I wanted to try was tiger nuts, couldn't find them anywhere. I could do this all over again because there were still more things that I could definitely try. So Nanny and Grandad, the legend duo, they're sending me a 1950s recipe book.
Look, I got it. I got the recipe book. It's amazing. I love it.
And the one that my nanny used to have when she was a child. So I'm thinking of throwing my millennial friends a 1950s dinner party, because when I was researching all the 1950s things, there are so many wild and wacky recipes, like so many peculiar things where I think they were trying to use the ingredients. So I think that would be really interesting. That the government gave them orange juice. They went to this place to collect orange juice and cod liver oil to keep their health up, because obviously they're actually one of the healthiest generations of all time, which is wild if you think about it. And some parking for dessert. I don't want any more parking. I'm done with parking, but got to use up what we've got.
It's debrief time, and there were actually so many things I wanted to add to this video. The first edit of this was like 45 minutes long, and that was after I'd tried to cut so much out of it. But there were so many things I still want to try, and so many like recipes my granddad suggested, and like snacks and things like that. So like I've barely even scratched the surface. The main things I took away from it were how lucky we are now. A, for me to even test all these recipes. B, for the food and like the innovation and the development of food and how far it's come. How much we take things for granted and like the variation. And in just 2 days of having the same meal, I'm like, oh, I'm so bored of having meat and 2 veg. But they literally would have that all week and they wouldn't complain because that was just what they had to do. They knew that that's what they would have to do. It's so interesting to me that all the development and the resources that we have now, yet we are one of the most unhealthiest generations that there has ever been. And in 1950, it was one of the healthiest generations there has ever been. And I genuinely could talk for ages about this, and I would love to find like an actual nutritionist or someone who could test to see the difference between the diets if I ate like that for a month or something like that. It's been so interesting to me, and I could talk for hours about the 1950s diet because it is so different from now. Obviously this is just for the UK, and I know that there are still other countries that are going through lots of struggles and lots of development issues still. Please factor that in and be kind in the comments to people. If you've enjoyed this video, obviously I'm not trained in this, I'm not a food historian or anything like that, so if I did get anything wrong, I'm just going off of what I read online and what my granddad said, so please don't hate on me. It was just a fun little experiment to try out. Hope you enjoyed, and maybe I can try the 1960s diet. Peace.